purpose of this video, it is to actually show you how Satan gets to hijack the prophetic visions. Well, I don't think that it's actually strange to most of us that Satan can actually hijack prophetic visions. He's been doing it, and he still is doing it up to this moment. Hence the Bible says that we need to actually be vigilant, for the enemy masquerades himself as an angel of light. So that word says he does, which is a present active tense. It's not something that he used to do. He is still doing it up to this very moment. Now, to begin this, I'm actually going to bring out any experience that I've had to you, and I want you to judge it. I want you to actually begin to judge this experience that I will tell you, and then I will begin to actually present my whole case before you. When I was about the age of 12, something remarkable took place. So I've had this cousin, Utulani. My cousin is still there. He's about 2 years younger than I. So there was something that was said concerning my cousin, that each time whenever he was sleeping, he had, he would sleepwalking. He would wake up and begin talking, doing things that were very funny and weird, and then go back to sleep immediately. So this was awkward, and at times it was said that he used to just run to the door. At one instance it actually happened, I think when he visited home, that only happened about twice, if not 3 times. I think twice maybe. And in one of those instances he really tried to run to the door, and then we kind of called him. However, in this one instance, I must have been around the ages of 12. Something remarkable happened. So in this time it was school holidays, and then he would be visiting me for the whole school holidays. And it was so strange because this time he would not actually sleepwalk or even talk during sleep. He would not do it at all. But what happened is this: in one night when we were sleeping, so we're sleeping on the same bed, he and I, and our heads would actually be facing the direction of east. Our bed would be straddled toward the east, and then our heads would be facing the eastern direction because our room was kind of elongated toward the east and the west. Now, and then toward the at the end of my feet, at the feet of the bed, just after my bed, there was a table that I had set which was dedicated for my prayer. I wasn't saved. I would be saved at the age of 17. I wasn't saved by this time. I hadn't even done imvumagufa, which is that process yobunda when they put beads on me when I was accepting the initial call of ubundawu of sangomas. That hadn't happened yet. Then what was interesting is I used to pray on that table. So I've had the call of God. I was conscious of it. I think I began to be conscious of it around the age of 8, that I'm really called to preach the gospel. That was one of those amazing things. It was just a knowledge, and my mother even knew, because my mother would tell me that how you were born because you were chosen. We saw how you were born. It was a process that God chose you. And my sister would tell me to say, when you were born, you were covered in a white veil and stuff like that. I don't like to actually entertain that stuff. Let's leave it behind. So then when I was 12, this thing would happen, which was remarkable. I was sleeping with my brother. We're facing the east, and then toward the end of my bed, toward the end, there was that table that was dedicated for prayer. I used to pray, Our Father who art in heaven. This was something that was transferred to me by my grandmother from the Eastern Cape. Every night before we would sleep, she would have me stand by the door facing inside the house. The door is closed, and then I would do Our Father art in heaven, and then go to my bed, and my grandmother would say Honandi, and then that is a good night in Isikos, and then that is when actually I would fall to sleep. Here's the thing. Now toward that table, what's interesting is that table would later, that was dedicated during that time when I was done ubunda, which is about 2 years after this experience I'm narrating to you. 2 years after, this very table would actually be dedicated as my my portal, the center, or umsama, or this is my place where this is my chamber. It would be dedicated, this very same spot, to be my chamber where I get to communicate with the ancestors, and as well as pray, because there were candles. I had also istonia, that's something else as well that I don't want to get into, maybe another time, as well as idlozi, all of this. So this is where syncretism comes in. That's why I'm against mixing God and ancestors, something for another time. Now, to not get distorted, let's get back to the story. So while sleeping on my bed, there's that table there. What's funny is I don't remember having set up straight. I don't remember the process. I don't remember having set up straight. No, I don't remember it. Like, the only thing I know that I was just seated up straight, and then I was just seated up straight. My buttocks were on the bed, and then my legs were stretched out, and I was facing the table. Remember, it's facing the eastern side, the direction from which you're sleeping. So meaning, if I actually wake up seated, I would be facing the western end, the western side. Then in this one night, I remember that I was talking and I was sleeping. So in this instance, this was an encounter, not just a vision. This was not a vision, it was an encounter, because it began to impact my physical body. My physical body began to actually, respond. So this was not an encounter. It was not. So my physical body began to respond. So this was not a vision, but something that happened of a truth. So while looking to that direction, I saw a light. This light was all over the house. It was all over. In fact, let me say the whole room. The whole room was lit. It was as if it was day, but I was aware. I was aware that it's at night. And this light was so interesting. It was not even like my ring light here, not even like the light we have on our globes, because when we have our light bulbs, the lights we have, they tend to turn sometimes like they're yellowish. It was a pure clean light. And just on top of the table, there was someone there. I have never seen a vision like this. It would be the first and the last time seeing it. Up to this moment, I've never had a vision like that. I repeat, I have seen Jesus in a vision about 3 times to 4 times. I've seen the Lord in a vision, but it was a vision, but this one was like more real. But Jesus, I've seen him like in a vision form. Then this person was on top of this. I could tell without even me knowing an inside knowledge. I knew that this was an angel. This is important for me to repeat to you. This was not a demon. This was an angel. You see, demons, when they come in dreams, they come in putting on, or even in visions, they come in the form of an animal or something. They take an animal of something, some sort. God uses animals to actually reveal them to us, because demons are disembodied spirits. Jesus speaks to us in Matthew 12. He says demons have no body. They don't have a body, so that's why they go around seeking someone to possess. Whenever they are cast out of an individual, they gotta seek another body to possess. They just need to have a body, because they walk, if they are cast out, they walk in dry places and stuff. I'm making a lot of videos concerning the distinction between demons and fallen angels. I'm not gonna go back there. Please look into one of those videos. I'm gonna try to find it and then pin it on the comment section, so that you actually begin to watch that video and see the distinction between fallen angels and demons. Fallen angels are operating in the second heaven. They don't need a body. They've got their own bodies, while fallen angels are fallen angels. While demons need human bodies to possess and stuff. I'm not saying that demons, fallen angels cannot possess. There was an instance where Satan possessed Judas Iscariot. That is a teaching for another one, where the Bible says Satan entered, not oppressed or inspired, but he entered Judas Iscariot. So they can possess a person, but they are not, they are not as allowed as demons. Demons as well, they are not allowed, hence we have to cast them out. But God can permit demons, while fallen angels are detrimental. They can cause like something else. There's a movie called Exorcist. Maybe you can watch that movie if you're not scared, if you're sure of yourself. The possession of that girl, for her head to be able to turn around, for the bed to be able to shake, you can tell that she would be possessed by an angel, not a demon. That is a higher level of possession, which is something that doesn't quite happen on earth. I've never seen anyone possessed by an angel. God would never allow that, so that we don't go and make these doctrines. So when I saw this person, I knew that this was an angel. So him, I want to explain to you how he looked like. I've never seen anything like that. This would be my first and last time ever seeing a man. This was a male I was looking at. So gorgeous. A man that was so gorgeous in that manner. So how he looked like, I'm going to explain to you. It's what I saw, not what I read, what I heard someone tell me. His face was like an Indian guy, you see, and his hair was like an Indian guy. Not a white guy where there's a long hair, that is white. It was an Indian hair, that hair, But the guy was so beautiful to a point which his face radiated with glory. I think this is one of those things where when you read in the scriptures, the Bible tells you, it says that, Jesus, his face turned before them, it was, his countenance changed before them, and it was glorified. So it was something like this. However, what was fun is that this guy, when he appeared on my table, he appeared only half-bodied. The other end actually kind of was submerged. I could tell that he's standing looking at me. He's standing looking at me, and then half of the table is on him. But how he appeared, I was aware that he's not standing like his feet. Okay, how I could tell is that this guy was standing but not standing. I just had that sense of knowledge. For a person that age, if you look at today, his age was like a person who's between the ages of 30 to 31, a young man. He was a young man. So for me to look at him, my table was short, man. It was this short. So his head, he only appeared this, by this, not even up to the torso where you put a belt, just half across the waist, half of the waist, like toward where there's the esophagus starts. That's how he appeared on my table. So I could tell if he's a real person, he would be actually kneeling down. He would be kneeling to actually appear like that. So it's more like his body would go through the earth, doing that. His feet would be going through the earth. And when he was looking at me, he spoke in Isixhosa. He didn't speak in it, and the Xhosa that he spoke to me was a pure Xhosa. It wasn't English, it wasn't Greek, it wasn't anything fancy. And he was looking at me, and he said to me, "Why, when you pray, you say, 'My Father who art in heaven'?" And then he kept quiet. He was very calm. He kept quiet. And then I said to him, "That is because our Father, it is the only prayer that is written in the Bible. And so, because Jesus commanded us to pray this way, then we pray that way." And then after looking at me saying that, and then he nodded. And when he nodded, I knew that this is time for him to leave. And immediately I felt a hand touch me. When this hand touched me, then I came back to my senses. It's like I was walking out of this dream. Now the thing that is interesting is this. I was actually still dreaming. However, my eyes were closed, but I was actually in a seated position on top of my bed. And then my cousin said, "Vuisanani." And I was like, "What? And then he was like to me, "Why are you talking?" He said, "You are talking sleeping. You are talking sleeping." And I said to him, "No, I'm talking to an angel." I answered in Isixhosa and Teta Nengilos. And when I had opened my eyes, of course, there was nothing there. It was just a dark room, and then took the blankets back and then went back to sleep. I was still, there was so much daze on me and my eyes, even in my mind, that toward, I think, the early hours of the morning, I was like, "God, did I say I was talking to an angel?" And then that shocked me. So what happened is I saw this, and this was a real instance, and my mother heard it as well when we were exchanging and talking. It didn't make sense, and my mother asked, and then I began to explain with even my cousin what I had seen, this angel and all of that. So I want you now to think of this. The reason why I'm narrating this in detail is because I want to challenge your mind to think of this. Is this angel from God, or this angel was a fallen angel? Please just think of that, and then I'll give my answer toward the end of this video. It won't be long. There's just about 3 things I want to show you, and then I'll close this video. I asked my pastor after I was saved about this vision, and to me it was hard for him to say, because he says, "Now I cannot really tell. I don't really know, what you experienced," because that's how the lines were blurry. Because even now, most believers, you ask them, "Do you pray, Our Father art in heaven?" They'll be like, "No, it's a prototype type of prayer. The Lord wasn't actually asking us to pray that prayer, but it's a prototype of how we can pray, or maybe offer ourselves to God in prayer and stuff." So that then was like, so I was being revealed. Was it because the angel, when he asked me, it was like he was sent, though he didn't tell me. So when he asked me, so it was like when I got saved, maybe it's because of this thing. So, but of praying Our Father, that we're not supposed to pray, stuff like that. But let me show you this. So then, angels can actually get to infiltrate visions of people. They can, fallen angels, the devil can actually, kind of enter into prophetic visions. Sometimes people cannot see because the message is blurred, and sometimes people are actually left with question marks, so you cannot really much see or know the reality of it all. So in many cases, the devil will do that, where he actually cements people to specific experiences, so that they are sure that where they are in the right path. If you can look into the religion of Islam, you'll be convinced that really this happens. In many other religions, even including Umasango, St. John's Apostolic Church here in South Africa, the guy saw something. Whatever happened, he says, I was at the verge of death, and then I was brought back from the dead, and then I came, they said, go preach and stuff, and then I went, and then you realize there's nothing about Jesus in him. For Islam, Muhammad saw an angel Gabriel. Was this a lie? No, he saw what he saw. And it's true and it's real. Now, what I want to show you is, if a vision is hard for you to detect, how can you know? And I'm gonna even break my example that I showed you of the vision I had. Was it an angel from heaven or from God? And how would you know? The Bible speaks to us. It says that the power of God was made known to Israel, but his ways were made known to Moses. I've discovered today that many prophets know the power of God, but they don't know his ways. That's why they are deceived. So what I'm about to show you is God's ways. When a vision is convincing, you can judge a vision by God's ways, not literally the message, because sometimes some messages can come like the damsel in Acts 16:16 with the spirit of divination. It confirms what you know. These are the servants of the Most High God who show you the way to life. Listen to them. You see, it's a demon there. It's not opposing anything of God, but instead it seems to be promoting God, only to find that actually if you know the truth, that works good for the enemy. Deception. Charles Spurgeon says that deception is not like the distinction between what's true and false. He says deception is what's true and what seems true. Three things, and then I close this video that I want you to see. It's verse 2 and 3. And then we'll jump to the third video. The Bible speaks concerning the good shepherd here and the sheep. It says, "With verily, verily I say unto you, he that enters not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber." So here you know by the ways, the ways of God and the ways of Satan. So you can pretty much know the ways, not the power. Because sometimes if you detect by power, you can, there are blurred lines. There's a distinction there. You might not even see who did the deed. And then verse 2 says, but he that enters in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. How can you know that is the shepherd, not the hireling or a thief? Verse 3, because sometimes you might think it's a thief and it's a hireling, and it's not the real shepherd. You have to know the distinction. To him, verse 3, the porter opens and the sheep hear his voice. Now, the key important thing is that the Bible firstly says, which the sheep hear the shepherd's voice. This is here. So the sheep hear the shepherd's voice. That's very key. And then in verse 3 again it says, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own by name and leads them out. So look at this. He knows them, he calls them by name, he leads them out. And verse 4 says, when he puts forth his own sheep, he goes before them. You see now, this is how you know that this is the Lord. It's like the leadership of God. The kingdom leadership says the leader lays down his life for his people, not the people to lay down the life for the leader, the good shepherd here. That's the principle of God. And when he puts his own sheep, verse 4, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. They hear, they know his voice. They hear, they know his voice. Now they hear, they know his voice. These are two things. They hear and they know his voice. It's not only enough for us to hear his voice, it's also enough for us to actually know his voice. Now the Greek word used here, because the New Testament, remember, it's written in what? It's written in Greek. It is actually the Greek word ida, or idol. That is the word that is used for know here. And it says, verse 5, and the stranger will they not follow, but will flee from him. These are sheep, not lambs. There's a distinction. So lambs can be deceived, because when you look into lambs, if you grow up in the rurals like I did, lambs can get to follow even a human, thinking that is the mother trying to suck. Lambs are like that. But sheep know, this is not the shepherd, this is not my owner, these are the sheep of my group, these are not the sheep of my flock. They know each other, and then these are sheep matured. So this is not speaking about baby Christians, but matured Christians who have learned by reason of exercise, know the voice of the master. This is sheep, not lambs. Know that. So it says they know. Now the Greek word know, that is because of there's an instinct that happens to a baby when a baby has a relationship while sucking the milk of of a mother and then sleeping on the chest of the father. The baby, even if the eyes are closed, the baby can tell when the mother walks in. Maybe the mother was doing washing, the child is on top of the bed. I have got 2 children, and then the child is crying, the baby is crying, the eyes are in that stage of not seeing but closed. But because of the baby is used to the mother's skin, oxytocin, that hormone, and any doctors normally and nurses put the child upon the mother's skin for the mother to bond. So because now the child knows the voice of the mother and knows the voice of the mother when the child is on the chest of the father. When you speak as a father, the child now knows. Even though the eyes are open, when the mother's voice comes in, she's or he's in the hands of many people in the room, but can hear that this is not the voice of the mother, and they can also smell this is not the smell of my mother. So that's the thing. And then when they're crying, the strangers are holding the baby, coming to see the baby, they're excited, but the baby now is crying because the baby is wondering, where's mother? Because this is not my mama's touch. And the mother steps into the room and the voice speaks. Then the baby is calm, extends out the hands because of he or she wants the mama. Why? Because of the child is Aido, which is the Greek, which means the child is familiar to the voice of the father or of the mother or the father. So firstly is that they have to hear. Then the second aspect is they have to know, because they heard the voice of the father, they are used to it. Now they know, which means familiar. Babies can hear the voice of the shepherd. Lambs can hear the voice of the shepherd. They can hear the voice, and even the enemy's voice they can hear. However, they cannot know because they need to first be familiar with the voice. We're going to be skipping on into verse 14 and then we close. And he says, Jesus, I am the good shepherd. So you can be a shepherd. The Bible does not dispute. But the question is, are you a good or a bad one? That's the only dispute, to say, are you a good or bad one? Anyone can be a shepherd. It's not a matter of not being, but it's a matter of good or bad. So he says, I am the good shepherd, in verse 14, and my sheep, and know my sheep, and am known of mine. So he says, I know my sheep, and am known of mine. This is the third knowing, it's different. In English, that's the problem. When you're reading things through English, they only say no. The first one was Aida, which is aware. My sheep are aware of my voice, This third one is the Greek word ginosko. This is an interesting word. Ginosko is different. Now, ginosko means to know by experiential knowledge. After having to hear and that you know the master, you need to gain an extra knowledge of ginosko. In ginosko, even if, let's say, it's not the master, now this is an age of growth now. When you were a baby, you heard your father and your mother, and then from then on you're familiar with their voice, which is Aida, the Greek, familiar with their voice. Now when you grow, you get to a point whereby you gain ginosko. There are things that my wife can hear about me, even though people can say he did it, and my wife can say, I know him, he would never do that. Now, that is not you. That's about you. These two voices, to hear the Lord and to know the Lord, which is to hear and Aida, this is from the master. This is the voice of the master. You hear it and you know it. You are familiar with the voice. This is from the master. However, when you come to ginosko, the Greek ginosko, this is not from the master, but this is about the master. Even the master is not there, can you know what this is this way? To say, no, this is God, this cannot be God. This is where now the mature are seen. Yeah, it's good to know him with the Aida, but you need to grow to this level whereby now you are ginosko, you have the ginosko, the full knowledge of the Lord, to say, I know the ways of God. The Bible says God revealed his power to Israel, but to Moses he revealed his ways. You need to be here, you know the ways, the abouts of the master, not necessarily hearing from him. Even if he's not there, can people lie about your master to you? That's the question. A mother knows a son, and a father knows a son. Honest parents. I'm talking about honest parents. So, no, my son can never do that. No, my son can never do that. No, my father can never do that. No, my wife can never do that. Now, this is that ginosko. Even though the person is not present, but you know about them. Even they say this letter comes from so and so. My wife doesn't write like this. My husband doesn't write like this. My wife would never write this. My wife doesn't use this word. My husband doesn't use this word. Now that is ginosko, experiential knowledge. Now this one comes with a process of years and growth. This is growth aspect. This is due to growth and experience. The ginosko is due to growth and experience. So this is where many prophets now would fall, because many prophets, the problem they have is they can hear God and as well as know God through the Ida knowledge. They are familiar, but they don't really know his ways. So sometimes they can be confused because of since they are operating in this tone. And some other prophets, the reason why they don't grow to come to a point, or even children of God, not necessarily prophets, they are deceived in their visions. That is because many of us love sensationalism. We are actually trapped by the idolatry of our hearts. We don't even want to check the vision. You just want to go and tell believers, God can talk to me, God showed to me. Well, it doesn't show you this. Guess what? Man, I've seen this and that. You just want to show that. So sometimes we fall ensnared by the pride in our lives, not necessarily because God is not actually there. If God can reveal that to you, you have the capacity to actually divide the truth. You have the capacity to know the truth if God reveals it to you. It might not be immediately, but God will protect you until the time you're ready. So let me show you something. Now, this is ginosko, is experiential knowledge. Let me show you an experiential knowledge of how to know God. There are things that you can know about God. You don't need supernatural knowledge or actual science to know this. You see, God is predictable. You sow a seed of prayer, you sow a seed of fasting, you sow a seed of singing his presence, you sow a seed of, planting into his word and knowledge and stuff. You know God is going to increase you in spiritual growth. The Bible says give and then it will be given unto you. It's just the principle of the kingdom. So these things you can predict God. Whenever the sin, God is going to bring in discipline. These are ways of God. These are just ways of God. God, you can predict him. You can accurately know his ways. Now, you can even predict him in how he does things. So in many cases, sometimes when visions are blurry, you just have to look at the nature and look at the aspects and characteristics, and then you can tell there's no God there. For example, a prophet comes, you're like, there's confusion in that dream, or there's confusion in that vision, or sometimes you're like, you know what, there's fear here. They don't give victory. Sometimes you must start like fear. Some you'd realize when they speak, they're actually bringing out at the end of the day exhortation. But God will never leave you with fear. And then this is true what this prophet told this person or told me. However, these are not the characteristics of God. God is love, God is peace. He can never. So there now you are not only hearing the voice or know the voice, you know the ways of God. Because of knowing the ways of God, you don't fall ensnared now. So it's by that. Now let me answer you and then close this. Talking about the experience I had with the vision that I just told you of. So with the vision that I told you of, was this angel that I saw when I was 12 a divine angel or a diabolic angel? It was an angel, not a demon. Okay, let me bring it to you now. The answer is it was actually a diabolic angel. It was not a divine angel. How do I know? You see, what the enemy wanted to do to create through me, I knew this later, many years of studying the word. This is when I found it out. Through the ways of God, knowing the ways of God. Look at this. You see, what God does is he doesn't lead you to idolatry firstly. And what God does is he doesn't establish you, he establishes himself. Any vision you have that always exalts you, how special you are. We've seen some of these visions of heaven and hell. You, my daughter, I show you this because I love you, because we might be loved. This is about the person, not about Jesus. We already know the Spirit leading them. I'm not saying that spirits cannot show you. They can show you heaven and hell and say, go tell people. That's because of why they bring in fear. They don't bring in the message of Jesus. As long as Jesus is not the center, they've done their deal. Paul doesn't necessarily say that angels cannot preach. He says even if an angel from heaven comes and preaches any other gospel, let him be accursed. When he says even an angel from heaven, he means the angels that are not yet fallen. To say if he brings in any other gospel than Jesus being the center and the foundation of Jesus laid, he says let him be accursed. Now let's continue this. So if an experience comes, doesn't exalt Jesus, then know something is wrong. Now again, let me show you this. So what my experience did is it solidified me in understanding where I am is the right path. I can see angels, so no one could convince me that I'm lost. This is the right path. Angels can be sent to actually talk to me. So this exalted me and then actually solidified me in the scene of ancestry, mixing ancestry and everything. Why would an angel come and be concerned only by me praying our Father art in heaven, when already in this same table I'm mixing prayer and I'm also mixing ancestry worship in your path? Why would you not care about that? So that actually actually what? It cemented me to my sin instead of making me actually question it. It didn't bring conviction, but it brought in a convincing thing for me to continue with the sin I was doing. So that was a diabolic angel. Secondly, that thing ended up becoming a cult. It ended up becoming an altar. When they came to bring in Ubundao, they chose that very same spot where that angel stood. God would never do that. God knows the future from the beginning. The first thing he would never do something that would actually end up catching up with him. No one catches up to God, because God is a spirit. He cannot learn. He knows everything. Now, the third thing, which is key, this one is the key, is the easiest, is the key point. If it was an angel sent by God, his whole body would appear legally. For the mere fact that the angel actually appeared half on the head, that meant this is a stolen access. It's not a full granted opportunity where he came to look at me like that. Now, looking was not a sin. So for the mere fact that the angel came and then on my table, its whole body was sucked up and then the whole part was out. So this shows that the angel actually didn't have full access. It was a stolen access. This was a permitted access, not a legal access. Okay, I know I'm going to confuse people. When I say permitted, God can allow certain things to happen, but it's not his will. So angels and fallen angels can operate on earth because they are permitted, but they are not legal. So that's what I'm trying to say. So if it's an angel from God, because the earth and everywhere, them to operate here on earth, they were supposed to appear fully when they are sent by God's delegation through your intervention, for your intervention. So they are supposed to appear fully, even if they appear, but they don't appear in a way that's dodgy. They're supposed to appear fully because they are rightfully granted access. So this angel only came, the head only appeared, not fully. So that means the angel had to access me through a specific portal. So this shows this was a thief. So this shows that this was a thief, this angel. It was fully a thief when it came, to speak to me. So just that, I could tell the ways of God when I grew up to say, nah, that is a fallen angel.